So a couple nights back, I decided to show one of my friends one of my favorite episodes of Batman the Animated Series, Showdown, in which we are introduced to fabled DC Western character Jonah Hex. My friend asked me, why is he wearing a Confederate uniform? I explained that he kinda only has one set of clothes. Having some Jonah Hex comics on hand, I thumbed through them and noticed that his belt buckle has the letters CS on it. Looking this up, I noticed that racists in the real world display said belt buckles on their Pinterest boards. And that was the beginning of the rabbit hole I've gone down. So I would like you to join me as we look into the problem with Jonah Hex. Now DC had a handful of Western characters, most of which were created in the late 40s and early 50s. But Jonah Hex? He was created in 1972, right after the peak of the Civil Rights Movement. And out of the settling dust walks a cool Clint Eastwood-inspired Confederate uniform-clad bounty hunter who brings criminals to his version of justice. Shockingly, this is not the first time DC has had a Confederate-themed protagonist. In 1961, the world was introduced to The Haunted Tank, a comic about a tank in World War II haunted by the spirit of Civil War General Jeb Stuart, with a big-ass Confederate flag waving on the back. In World War II. I wish I could make this up. So, for 17 years, both Jonah Hex and The Haunted Tank were being sold on store shelves together. Not the way I would expect comics to look after the age of equal rights. Upon further research, I have found two comic book-based arguments along the lines of, he's totally not racist because... The first being his origin with the Apache. As a young boy, his alcoholic father sold him to the Apache for safe passage and whiskey money. And Jonah was enslaved, in huge quotation marks, by them until he was adopted by the chief and brought into the fold. That is a bullshit argument for two reasons. One, he was adopted by them. He was not forced to work till he died, he was not forced to fight for master's amusement, and he was not whipped to death. The second reason this is bullshit is because the Apache didn't take slaves. Or at least not in the sense that plantation owners took slaves. That brand of slavery did not actually make it past Kansas, whereas the Apache would have likely been in the Pacific Southwest. The other argument comes from Weird Western Tales issue 29. In this issue, we learn that Jonah Hex did not agree with the treatment of black people during the war, and feels he cannot continue to fight for a nation that supports slavery. But he also does not want to fight his friends, so his plan is to spend the rest of the war in a Union prison. He proceeds to the Union base and sneaks into the general's quarters to surrender to the man himself. But Jonah refuses to tell him where the rest of the Confederate soldiers are. The general then calls in a black soldier to take Jonah to his cell. In doing this, the general refers to the soldier as a racial slur. Jonah thinks, gee, the black folks can't win no matter what side they're on. This same black soldier deduces from the red clay on the hooves of Jonah's horse exactly where the Confederate base is. So with this info, the entire Confederate regiment are taken without firing a single shot. The general wants to personally thank Jonah, but Jonah is horrified and punches the general in the jaw. Later that night, Jonah tries to escape with his buddies, but they are caught and gunned down in seconds. Only Jonah and a handful of survivors escape, leaving Jonah to forever be seen as a traitor in the eyes of the Confederacy. Then why the hell is he still wearing the uniform? If people out there hate you for what you did during the war, still wearing that uniform is going to paint a huge target on your back. If you don't agree with what the Confederacy did, then why still wear their colors? This whole thing just feels like mental backflips to get you to think that the Confederacy and all its iconography is okay. It's not. Now, to many Jonah Hex fans, the next thing I want to bring up would be considered an embarrassing stain on the character's legacy. But to me, is another smoking gun. That being the Hex comics. After Crisis on Infinite Earths, they decided to shake things up and have Jonah time travel to a far-off apocalyptic future. In these comics, he does not wear the Confederate uniform. And he's still Jonah Hex. He's still just a man using his cowboy know-how to survive and take down criminals, proving that the uniform was never important to his character. So naturally, in my research, I had to take a look at the movie. And guess what? It doesn't get any less racist. The movie is bad, for many reasons. It's cliché. The only female character is an uninteresting caricature of a sex worker. The CG is god-awful. The plot is hard to follow, and the massive changes do not enhance the plot. For instance, in this version of the story, the big bad is a Confederate officer that murdered Jonah Hex's family in front of him, putting more women and children in refrigerators, but that's video for another day. And this family murderer takes a firebrand to Jonah's face, which metamorphosizes into the mark of the demon. And they gave him this talk to the dead superpower for some reason. But you know what they didn't change? Yep, he's still sporting that uniform, loud and proud. And they gave him an even dumber reason why he is not racist.
You and I both know the only reason you fought for the South is you ain't like being told what to do by the government.
He doesn't like being told what to do by the government. So he signed up to be told what to do by a different, disorganized, and more racist government. And having a black guy say this sounds like your right-wing aunt using a slur and justifying it by saying she has black friends. So while waiting for the post-credits Easter egg, the music fades out and is replaced with...
Oh, I am a good old rebel, no, that's just what I am. And for this Yankee nation, I do not give a damn. I'm glad I found a canner, I only wish we won. I ain't asked any pardon for anything I've done.
So the post-credits Easter egg of this movie is just more racism. After all this, I'm still a Jonah Hex fan. But the uniform has got to go. For too long, Hex has been a character drawn to make the Confederacy look cool. If Batman walked around in an SS uniform, we would not take it. If Hawkeye wore a Klansman hood, we would not take it. So why would Jonah Hex be any different? Comic books have always been political, and most of my favorite heroes would agree that Black Lives Matter, trans rights are human rights, and hate symbols have never been heritage. They have always been hate. So I will leave you now with superheroes punching racists in the face. The way it should be.